You're still watching Morning at 10 TV. I'm Arnold Segawa. It's exactly 17 minutes to 8 a.m. My math is really getting worse. Time to shift our focus to the election trail and the election campaigns and leading up to 2021. Many aspirants are coming forth. Last we checked, it was just over 44 people. But we'll definitely try our best to run through as many as we can and just give you a sense of what they bring to the table and what they plan to do differently. Today we do have former journalist, Mr. or should I say Pastor Joseph Kabuleta, who is also made it very clear that he is willing to run for the top job. Mr. Kabuleta, many thanks for making time to speak to us.
Oh, you're welcome.
Is it fair for me to say pastor or it's Mr. in this particular domain?
Whichever suits you.
Okay. Let's start with, you're a man of many hats. Over the years, you've been a journalist, you've morphed over to evangelism, and now time for the top job. Is this a clear summation of what you are, or can some critics actually say that you are a very undecided gentleman?
Well, no, I'm not undecided because I'm just not somebody who is who thinks I should be limited to one thing because people know you as this, so you should be that all your life. I'm willing to move on. When I find, before I was a journalist, there was something that I was, okay, and so I became a journalist somewhere along the way. And then when journalism, I felt that had run its course, I moved into Christian ministry, and that is still going on. So is the journalism, because those are things you do not quite dispense of. You know, you always kind of stay journalist, but that doesn't stop me from moving into other areas now, and I am doing that. And even after that, after I've been president, that will not stop me from being anything else that I want to be. Because I really do not think that anybody should think, you know, you have one definition, one tag, and then you run with that the rest of your life. Unless, of course, you're comfortable with that. But I don't believe that is the way I do my things.
Right. If we're to, you made it very clear yesterday that you are ready to run for the top job. If someone has never met you, someone has never listened to you, what would you say sums up Joseph Kabuleta? What do you bring to the table that hasn't been offered for the over 30 years that the incumbent has been around?
Oh, a lot. Actually, I bring to the table the exact opposite of what has been offered over the 30 years, because the 30 years have been about financial separation of people, have been about the wealth of this country being shared out among a very small cluster of people, and the rest of the country just standing by and watching and actually almost cheering as their wealth is being shared out by people, and they know very well that they are not going to be partakers in it. We bring it, so I bring actually the exact opposite of what has been there the 30 years, because
Joseph, that's where it gets interesting, because on one hand, if someone was around in the late 80s and they saw the human capital indices, they saw our economic growth, they saw a struggling Uganda shilling, they would argue that the incumbent regime has tried to turn the economy around. We have a higher mortality index, lower birth rates, poverty alleviation. All these things have been achieved in that time. What would you say to that person?
Oh, that's all a smoke screen, because you have all those indices, but the truth is, how do they reflect personally at different people's levels? I will tell you that I was about, I think in S1 when this government took over. So I was of understanding age in the previous year. So I know exactly what I'm talking about when I say there was a lot more to life there than back then. Actually, a lot of the problems that we were having at that time were because of the current president, because he was in the bush fighting. If that president who was there had the liberty of having, a peaceful government, who knows what he could have done. But he never had that. As soon as he was declared president, whether wrongly or so on, there was somebody, fighting him. So the thing is, all those indices, there is growth that is natural. Okay? It's like saying 20 years ago, I didn't have a beard, I have a beard now. That is expected. There is natural growth. So there are certain things that would occur in spite of Museveni. But then there is growth which you can attribute to a deliberate policy. And there's been very little of that. Very, very precious little of that. And I would even task you to look at for any such growth which really you can say this is down to this. And, it's natural that life expectancy is going to go up because, you know, there are improvements in medicine and what. Then, you know, at the time, of course, there was all these problems with HIV and so on. And so many young people were dying because of that, and so on and so forth. But now, a lot of those things have changed. However, what we must be doing right now is comparing ourselves to other countries around us, not comparing ourselves to ourselves, because that is foolish. Because now, how far have other countries around us moved in the same period?
Which country then would you say has moved way further in arguably the same period, and we should actually maybe be having a cross-analysis here?
Oh, there are quite a number. I mean, I'll just mention the one which has been making the news right now, which is Tanzania, which has, you've made middle income, you know, something that we still aspire to and make a goal of and so on. And they've acquired it as of the beginning of this month. And what do they have apart from a cost and good leadership? I mean, apart from the fact that they're not landlocked and good leadership, what do they have on us? They don't have. They don't wait. They do not have.
Tanzania has never had a war. Tanzania has never had a.
We've not had one for them in the most part of the country for 35 years. That's enough time for us to have done so many things. So we are not going to be looking at wars which happened 35 years ago before 80% or even perhaps more than that of Ugandans were born, and use that as an alibi for the, you know, how stagnated we've become over the years. So what I'm saying is, what do they have in form of resources and what? The one thing they have over us is they have good leadership, which we definitely do not have, and perhaps, you know, they are not landlocked like we are. Aside from that, we have a lot more going for us than they do, but they are making a lot more out of what they have than we are out of what we have. And then we are, you know, picking up small bits of growth and trying to magnify them because we really have stagnated. Okay, we really have stagnated. There's nothing you can point to, and even if I tasked you, you'd know that there's absolutely nothing. Actually, we've not stagnated, we've retrogressed over these years. Now, and this is what we are bringing to the table, okay? We are bringing the fact that there is a system, and we know it very well, and that system has been set out to make sure that a majority of Ugandans, which includes you and I, are not going to be a partaker in the actual wealth of this country. We just be survivors, you know, some hustlers and so on, while we know it's all being taken elsewhere. And the clear manifestation of it was all in this COVID thing, where, you know, you're hearing health people who are at the front line of the apparently fighting the disease are the ones who are not being paid, yet we are taking billions and billions and billions of loans, trillions actually of loans, and to do what? Where is that money going? Will I just, a supplementary budget, a whole year of 3.5 million supplementary budget of classified expenditure? Where does that go? Or, a lot of money for this. Now, even up to recently, 1 trillion should fight coronavirus. How are they fighting coronavirus? We know that, and this is the thing, this is the elephant in the room. Everybody knows that all that money goes somewhere, and they know that the majority of us will never be able to be partakers in that thing. Now, the thing is, the only person who can deliver on what I am promising right now to make the people of this country be, get excited when they hear that there's something good that has happened because it's going to affect them positively, the only person who can deliver that is myself. I will tell you that the rest of the people, they will get there and somehow, but I am passionate about what I'm talking about,
Joseph,
and that is the financial, financial liberation of the people of this country, because we've been suppressed.
Joseph, I love where you're coming from, and I love that you kind of wear all of this on your sleeve. You're not afraid to put it on the table, and I love that. What you're describing for me is something that we've touched on countless times, which is the death of institutions. The reason why we keep on having all these supplementaries and unclassified expenditures is because there is no ombudsman of sorts. There's no oversight that can wake up and say, where's this money going? Show us some accountability. When they find someone from the OPM's office with sacks of grain that is meant to be donated, what happens then? Is this person taken to the courts of law? After how long? are pending cases in the DPP. Institutions are dead. And to answer your first question, when you asked, what does Tanzania have over us? Well, Magufuli is putting people in prison. That is, it's not even Magufuli, it is institutions that are working. That's why they can change from Jakaya Kikwete, they hand over to someone else, they hand over, and they've been doing, Chapa Cha Mapinduzi has been doing this with a change of guard, but most importantly, institutions are functioning. Now, for me, for you to address this by saying that you are the only person who can do that, President Museveni also came on saying the same thing. But what we could do is, how about you address this by saying that you can fight this by functional institutions and you just push your energy there? How about we address that? How can we change our institutions and not necessarily making it a one-man show like someone who's been around for over 30 years?
Well, first of all, you are writing my manifesto for me. I thought I was actually here to do that.
At this rate, you might give me a job.
So please ask me about what I'm here, what I'm bringing to the table, rather than telling me what I should bring to the table, because I've thought about that for 2 years. The institutions and everything.
Is this you saying that you concur with what I'm saying?
First of all, you first concur with what I was saying, that they have good leadership, which we do not have. Tanzania. That's what
obviously change of guard is definitely good.
Yeah,
yes, good
and for even in all of that, we know that they could have gone a different, even with the change of of the leadership, they could have gone one different direction if they didn't have a leader who had the political will to do certain things, to stem all those things, because we know all the deals they made with China. Under Kikwete, which Magufuli came and changed and so on. So the thing is, there has to be political will. Now, why is it that all those people you're talking about, Prime Minister's office and so on, nothing happens? Because there's no political will. But then, I don't want you to reduce me to talking about problems. We've done that for 35 years. I'm not here to talk problems. We all know what the problem is, and I am here to talk solutions. And I'm here to deliver solutions. So I'm not here to say, there's something wrong with this, there's something wrong with this. I'm just awakening you to the fact that the truth is you are an observer in the way this country is run. You are not a partaker, and yet you are born here, and this is your country. So, everybody's, the biggest problem we're having, everybody seems to be resigned to the fact that, there's going to be a win for Museveni. There is not going to be a win for Museveni. He is not going to be president next year. But you can take that to the bank. Now, listen to this. Now, here, and it suits him just fine when people who are supposed to be offering solutions are actually continuing to lament about the problem. So you want me to stand here and lament about corruption and so on and so forth? I'm not here to do that. I'm here to say that I am a solution, and I'm offering myself as a solution, because I am the one person actually who is promising that a vote for me is actually a vote to make you, a participant, in the growth figures of this country, so that when you listen to, figures coming out of budget speeches, it is not just rhetoric. But it is something that will eventually reflect on your pocket.
Because how do you plan to do that? Because if you say that you want us to be partakers in this particular conversation, and you actually do mention this, it's actually in the Daily Monitor today. A vote for us is a vote for financial liberation, a vote to break the ceiling. That vote will for every Ugandan be the first step towards a country of our dreams. How do you plan to break this down, to trickle down to an ordinary Joe, like an ordinary Arnold deep down there in Kaleri? How do you plan to do that?
Okay, here's the thing. First of all, let me explain what I mean by the seeding, because that's a key phraseology for our campaign, because we know what seedings do. Seeding. So there is a seeding, which means that a majority of Ugandans who are below the ceiling cannot go beyond a certain point within the context of this country. And it's a lot more difficult outside, because, so you are in your country, but there is a ceiling above which you cannot go in terms of wealth acquisition, because every time you try to go up, you hit your head on a ceiling. But that ceiling serves two purposes. It also means that there are people above the ceiling who actually are in control of all the resources, and the ceiling ensures that those resources do not come down. Now, previously, in the first perhaps 20 years of this government, the ceiling was a bit porous and a few things were falling through, and people were feeding off crumbs. But now the ceiling is made of concrete. and nothing is falling through, and the people down are becoming increasingly desperate. So this is what we are talking about. We are here to break that ceiling, which means that everybody has an opportunity to rise up as far as their innovation and their business acumen and whatever it is they bring on the table can take them, and not because they are not related to somebody who is related to somebody, as you know. You see, this is the elephant, you know, and all Ugandans know it. Now, and that's what we are talking about. So now that ceiling, number one, ensures that things come down from up where they are being held, and number two, ensures that people down can actually go up if they are very brilliant, if they are good at business and good at something, if they can innovate. There is an opportunity for them to get wherever. There is nothing stopping them from, you know, the sky is the limit sort of thing. So now this is what we are talking about. Now, going into how we are going to do that. Of course, that is a very, very long question. It is really a long question of how, you know, the nitty-gritty of how you're going to do it. But first of all, we have to appreciate that we are going into a really interesting time in Uganda in as far as exploration of our wealth is concerned. Okay? We know that the previous budget allocated just for Karamoja region and geomapping, $82 billion. I'm sorry, 82 billion shillings, sorry, for geomapping there. There is plenty of minerals in that place, okay? But even before, because it's the only place that was not geomapped when they did the mineral and, well, I mean, the mining and whatever policy. Now, the rest of the country, 80% of the country, which was mapped, has already 27 different minerals in there, all of which are actually in quantities that make them extremely commercially viable. And we are just going to start that. Now, I have to tell you, in the 60s, mining contributed to about 30%, you know, of our export GDP and so on. Now, that fell down almost by 100 to 0.3% at some stage. Now, we have a chance for that to go higher now that we're talking about all that wealth. Now, in the next few years, if these timelines that have been set by these people, of course, I rarely believe, you know, a lot of what they say is very unbelievable, but they say the pipeline will be, you know, transporting by that time 260,000 barrels of crude oil per day. Okay? There is even talk of, you know, the refinery, which will actually be refining almost as much crude. So, and that's before we go even into the other areas that we've not touched of our wealth. For instance, our agricultural wealth. Okay, we have half of East Africa's arable land.
But
wait.
Joseph,
You're still
not
now,
addressing. You're still not addressing the
I am going to address
you
it.
You cannot reduce an entire country to just oil, unless you're South Sudan, which has no land, which has no nothing. You have a youthful population. You have a country that is littered with people whose average age is under 20 years. How are you going to address that? You cannot address that with just minerals. How are you going to address that if you are president tomorrow, you wake up, you have the top job, and they tell you the systems are broken, there's corruption littered everywhere, how do you address that with just minerals?
Well, you see, you've not heard anything I've said. I'm still delivering. I'm saying a lot of where our wealth is. And I'm telling you that the poverty that is in this country and the lack of jobs and the lack of proper income. I'll give you an example. There's hardly a corporate sector in this country. There's very little in form of advertising and so on. That's why even people in the media like yourself do not get paid the way you're supposed to be paid, because you can only be paid as much as the station you work for earns, and the station is going to earn very little unless that there is a real, you know, building of, you know, companies and indigenous, especially, companies and the corporate sector and which is, you know, a competition in the marketplace, which has been taken away. The systems you're talking about are very easy to install, reinstitute, because they were taken away deliberately. So that power is vested in one office, and we all know that. Parliament has been dismantled more or less. Hardly any of their decisions pass. They are just overridden. The judiciary is the same, and it has been very systematic for the one purpose, that they want power vested in one person. Now, what you're talking about is you're trying to divert me from something which I'm not, you know, here to talk about really. But institutions, thank you very much. Those are so easy to put back as long as there is a will to have power shared out among other people. And that is, of course, at the heart of the way we think a country should be governed. But first and foremost, for me, is the issue of resources, because we're talking about even corporate people who in reality are living on the edge. They cannot afford. They cannot afford. Now, I was seeing somebody who had to go and have a very minor operation, and now we are not talking about, you know, poor people. We're talking about actual corporate people. A simple minor operation, and here is somebody who has a car, who has, you know, puts on a suit and puts on a tie like yourself and so on, but it's actually juggling a ball, and you cannot afford to skip a step, because if you have one small health crisis, you're done. Now that's the corporate. And now there is a reason why this has been like this, and that's because they have not been, you know, that's because of the ceiling, actually, because you're trying to survive within very limited resources and try to make a living out of them. And even those resources are now being invaded with all these extra taxes, you know, now, you know,
but now to maybe bring this back, the reason why the incumbent gets to win is because
he cheats. That's it. Is because the problem with Ugandans is that you are so good at pretending.
Joseph,
do you really think?
Let me finish.
Do you really think that he won 60% of the election last time?
Joseph, let me finish this. The problem is that we people here who are wearing ties, we push this conversation and we ignore that the informal sector and people who have a small subsistence farm in their backyard, they are the majority of our very, very poor country. A country whose GDP per capita is less than $900. A country that was forgiven for all its debt in the year 2000, and now it has risen again to about 48, 47%. So we are a poor people. Now, what you're explaining...
47% of what?
Debt to GDP.
No, actually, we are higher than that.
Well, that's what the IMF is giving us.
Okay.
But what I'm saying is we are a very poor people. What you're addressing is people like you and I who wake up and have to choose between 15 ties before we go to the office. How are you going to address the informal sector, which is, God knows, close to 70% of our population?
Oh, those are the easiest to address, because they are the ones who have actually been deliberately kept poor, because the communist mindset of our leader is that if you keep them poor, they keep you in power. So they have been deliberately kept poor. And those are people who were not poor before he came into office. And I must tell you that when I was going to school in those years, there were people who were what you'd call, you know, farmers and sons of farmers. And they were living a very good life. And they were going to good schools. And they were not working in places like this. They were not choosing between ties. They were actually people who would go out in the field, but that was lucrative at the time. And they were making money from it. And it has been deliberately taken away from them for that purpose. So for the purpose of keeping them poor, so that they keep, you know, because poor people are easier to govern in the mind of these people. If you want to govern for 35 years and pass on the baton to somebody, perhaps from your family, then you're going to have to keep people poor. However, this is what we are here to change. Now, what I'm trying to tell you is the reason those people are poor is because everything that is of resource in this country has been deliberately shut out from their reach. And now that's what we are trying to address, to make it, you know, accessible to them. And even the people who are choosing between ties, look at their life and see if they really have anything, you know, that you would call wealth.
Joseph,
they are all living on the edge.
Joseph, do you know Zimbabwe's largest export? It's human capital. And with human capital, they're able to export people from Nairobi to the US, to the UK. Of course, Zimbabwe is a very unique example because of the sanctions that have been enforced on Zimbabwe and, you know, from the US to the United Nations. But this is a country that is literally thriving on remittances. Shouldn't your emphasis be on equipping Ugandans, the very, very young Ugandans that we have, away from resources, mineral resources?
No, you're trying to limit me to one kind of resource. I was actually naming a number of them, but okay, resources, keep it there.
Human capital. Shouldn't that be our primary emphasis? Because if you are to look at our highest ranking university that was once hailed as the Harvard of Africa, Makerere University, it's now, God knows, not even in the top 600 of the world globally. Shouldn't that be an emphasis going forward for a very, very youthful population? I mean, at a time when our population on the continent is going to double by 2050.
Now, let me tell you, help me understand what you're asking. So are you saying, shouldn't I focus on being like Zimbabwe, having human,
Because in the process of, let's say, mineral exploration, in the process of working on our
is that what we are
institutions-
asking?
Yes, yes. In the process,
Okay.
I think we need to have a pecking order.
Okay,
before-
let me answer that. Here's the thing. What I would want is for any Ugandan who leaves this place not to leave it because they are being pushed to the limits of poverty and they have no choice. I want it to be out of choice rather than out of total desperation. So I want to create a scenario in this country where people can have a living, a proper living, and an aspiration to acquire things without them feeling that the only opportunity they have is to get out of this country. I even want to make it so attractive that even the people who are out of this country already, who have been out for quite so long, will consider coming back and bringing their knowledge and their expertise to this place, because there's a lot they can contribute. Now here we talk about remittances, and those people in the diaspora actually send a lot of remittances. But the thing is, they are doing that, but we want their money, but we don't want their brains. We kind of tell them, bring the money, but kind of stay there, because they have stayed in organized societies for so long. So many of them would have a lot to offer if this country was properly run. To say, we've lived in organized places, and this is what we can offer if they come back here. Now, the thing is, can we create a conducive socio-economic environment to make them think, what are we still doing, in these foreign countries? Perhaps we should think of going home. That's what I want. And even these who are being trained here, there are not that many that we should not be able to get for them jobs, and we have the kind of unemployment rates that we do have right now. We actually, we can create that kind of economy that will take up all these people, okay, and make them have a proper living in their country. So if they choose to go and lend their labor abroad, it is not out of desperation. It is out of choice, perhaps out of having better opportunities there, or career advancement or something like that, going for a master's and so on, but not because they are being pushed to the wall, which is what is happening right now. And most of the labor we're exporting is actually very zero-skilled labor, a lot of it, some of it very low-skilled labor, and they are going, and okay, the remittances, especially these now who are going to the Middle East and so on, and they are dehumanized, a lot of them. And why? I want them to go there and say, I came here out of choice. If this is not working for me, I can go back. But many of them will tell you of horror stories, but they still cannot come back because they are coming back to another horror. Now, that is the sad part. We do not want this country to be a horror for anybody who was born here, because we are so blessed by the Creator to have so many things. We can make something really out of this country. Now, unfortunately, because of bad leadership for the last 3 decades, and and counting, more than 3 decades, all that has been despoiled. But not for everybody. There are those who, of course, are benefiting, in the billions of dollars and so on. But for the majority of us, and I'm talking about people who have to choose between ties, as you've said, a majority of us, it is still, it's just, a different level of desperation. But there is still a level of desperation. So we have to understand, my brother, that there is a lot that can be done for this country. And there is a lot of hope. And we are going into a very interesting period for this country in terms of, all these things I've been telling you about wealth exploration. But we all know that with this system in place, we shall not partake of it. We shall only talk about it and shall only appear in figures that you're rolling off your tongue right now. Now, I want that to change.
Right.
I want it to appear in your wallet, in your purchasing power,
right?
In the choices that you make and so on.
Joseph, let me just put a breather on that. If you're just joining us, you're watching Morning at NTV. I'm Arnold Sagawa. We do have presidential aspirant Joseph Kabuleta here today to just walk us through what he brings to the table. Joseph, earlier on, you mentioned something that was interesting. You said, you are the only one who can deliver this. I'm paraphrasing you, yes, but safe to say you actually said this.
Yeah, I said that.
And this then leads me wondering, because I'm holding the monitor right now, 44 people have come to the fray to say that they want the top job for the presidency. You are now in the fray. There's Honorable Chagulanyi, there's Mugisha Muntu, unconfirmed reports of Dr. Kiza Besigye also being courted by the FDC to run yet again. What makes you way superior to all the mentioned above?
Because I have a clear message that I'm fronting. I want you to tell me what any one of those messages are. Whereas anybody out there who knows that I'm standing, knows that I'm standing to end the economic civil war, I'm standing on financial liberation, or, that's my message. Now, I have not had any of those other candidates actually come out with a clear message for Ugandans. None of them, not even the incumbent. So all of them, and now there are the incumbent who comes on, expecting the usual, process of, rigging and so on to take over. Then we have others who are only coming on the ticket of removing the incumbent. And I am saying that I am not into that. There's something that I have been hatching, which I'm passionate about, which is at the heart of, my campaign and my reason for coming out. And that is what I'm articulating here today, or I'm attempting to articulate until you interrupt me. That is the issue of the wealth of Uganda belonging to Ugandans. That wealth, there are other issues, I know. But the issue on which I am standing and which I am perpetuating and which, I'm trying to emphasize and which is going to be at the heart of everything I do when I become president is the wealth of Ugandans, the wealth of this country belonging to the people of this country. That is it. Now, none of the candidates you've mentioned have a message that they've come out with, apart from the generalities, change and to move freedom and nothing specific. Can you say that I'm wrong about that?
No, that is not my place. I would have
no,
to
as a journalist, tell me, have you had...
No. It wouldn't be fair to echo the words of someone else when they're not there. That's why initially, and that's the difference between well-moderated debate. That's why initially I had to first ask you that earlier on, you mentioned this and the other, and I had to ask you to confirm. Now, I cannot read someone's campaign message when they're not here and then ask you to comment on that when they're not here. That would not be professional.
Can I ask you a question? Sorry, even if you're supposed to be the one asking questions.
No.
Just a simple one.
I see you wearing the journalist's hat.
No.
Right
I'm trying to make a point.
This right here is my Garden of Eden, and I am God. And in this particular garden, I get to decide who eats the fruit and who I chase out. So I get to ask the questions. Going forward, it wouldn't be right for me to put words in someone's mouth when they're not here. And that right there maybe is the difference between NTV and some other TVs out there. So I want this to stay with us. All I could ask you was, you've seen other people come to the front. What makes you different? I love that you've answered that.
I've answered that.
You've answered that, and now we could move on. What's your take on the Economic Freedom Fighters, EFF, in South Africa? Julius Malema's party.
Well, I don't know too much about them to have a real opinion about them. I just know what they say they stand for, and.
Do you see any similarities between your message? Because he also campaigns on economic freedom for the ordinary South African, not the Afrikaners, not the other minorities, but the ordinary black folk. Do you see any similarities overlapping here? No,
I do not, because the issues they're having are totally different. Because the historical background of the minority rule and so on, and the minority owning everything and so on. So he's coming from a different place than I am. Our messages are completely different in that regard, because the issues of South Africa are different from ours. But then what I'm saying here is that what I want you to take from this is that there is a campaign slogan for me and for us, which is about financial liberation, wealth of Uganda, for Ugandans. And even if you quoted that when I am not here, you wouldn't be, wrong. For instance, if I said Trump campaigns on Make America Great Again, I wouldn't be wrong. I don't have to have Trump here to say that he campaigns on that platform, because he's made it very clear that that was the platform on which he campaigned. You understand? No, but, so I'm trying to explain something here. So when I leave this place, please feel free to quote what it is that I'm standing for without me being here, even to somebody else, and ask them what they think about it. The point is that there is an identity that is attached to every campaign. Okay, at least campaigns like mine Others, I have not known what their identity is. Now, mine has a specific identity. And that is what I want us to take out of this place.
I love that we're going here because definitely something that is right is the right to reply, the right to response. Now, if I ask someone to contrast their campaign to Kabuleta's campaign, and you do not have the right to respond because you're not here, then that's not right.
Now,
so I wouldn't push them there.
No,
so they get to critique your campaign. Oh no, this guy has nothing here. Financial liberation is really not a thing. We already are liberated, hypothetically, if it's an NRM person. Yet you're not here to say, hold up, there's no liberation here because these points that you have eloquently mentioned. That would not be very professional.
Yes,
I would definitely push.
I get that, yeah.
That is right to response. And again, mentioning that, that's the difference between some other naysayers and pretenders and the rest of us. In the past, you had a bit of a spat with the incumbent, maybe his family too, and you went on social media. You had a very, very long post, and that maybe wasn't very well received. Tell me, did that kind of inform your decision to run, or was your decision already put forward? And how was that particular experience to start with?
That experience is typical of what you expect from this regime: fear, trying to instill fear, and trying to make you steer away from a course that you are taking.
What were the charges?
The charges were offensive communication against the president, using the Computer Misuse Act against the Fountain of Honor. Okay, I'm sorry I have to put that in quotes because anyway, but yeah, those were the charges. But the file is still gathering dust at the DPP's office, and the things they looted from my office are still held there. My computers, my checkbooks and everything. They are just a rogue regime, that's the truth. They are a rogue regime. There is nothing, they really are, I mean, it's sad that there was a time we believed that they were liberators, because they are worse than what they liberated us from. They have become extremely worse.
Is there anything that President Museveni has gotten right in his 30+ years of ruling?
When you host Ofono Opondo, you ask him that. I'm here to talk about the Rock and about Joseph Kabuleta reclaiming our country and our kin. And I'm not here to talk about him. He actually is yesterday's news because he's on his way out. That's definitely the case. So Museveni is yesterday's news. And since you're in the news business, I am the one who is the news now. So please stick to the news. When we want to do all these, then we'll go to Museveni. Museveni is actually on his way out. And Ugandans really have to believe that, because he has imposed, he's imposed this picture of invincibility on Ugandans, which makes them, in as much as they don't like him, they find him too formidable in their minds. He has built this thing. It's almost like, a battered wife who has this image of, a man who has built this. You understand what I'm saying?
Have you met him? Have you met him?
Who, him?
Yes, the president.
No, not personally.
Okay.
Why do you ask that?
Because I would picture you sitting down with him and saying all these things, and I think it would be quite interesting. That's
I wonder what circumstances it would be that would I meet him. But anyway, maybe I'll meet him when he's handing over, to me for the first time. Maybe that's the only time I would really want to meet him. By the way. Apart from that, I would not have any business meeting him. We have nothing in common.
Well, it's not necessarily about commonality. Maybe, as you said, even President Trump had to meet President Barack Obama.
When he was handing over, right?
Well, yes.
Right?
Fair enough. Going back to your election campaign, financial liberation is it's a very big word, especially if you're picking up from someone who has been around for such a long time. And the reason why I say that is because 30 years in economic indicators is a very long time for someone to show progress. What do I mean? If we're to look at GDP figures, just between 2020 and 2010, with the exception of COVID and maybe the commodities crunch around 2014, 2015, We have been seeing some stellar growth, if we are to use GDP figures, in the region, not just Uganda, in the region. Of course, Ethiopia north of 8%. And Uganda has also been north of 5%. These are some good figures. If we were to take it back, maybe with the exception of the financial crisis of 2008, still, these are some very good figures. How then do you sell financial inclusion? I know that liberation. I know you're
inclusion is a good word, actually.
Inclusion, yeah, though it's misunderstood at times by some people. They think inclusion equals a bank account, which is wrong for some of us. How then do you sell this to people in a broad manner? Maybe something that Ethiopia has done. I want us to think in abstract terms here, because Ethiopia has managed to lift, it's like our China example on on the African continent. It's broad-based growth. How does this trickle down? I know you've mentioned the issue of resources. I've tried to bring in the issue of human capital. How do we bring this in a very, very broad manner, as opposed to giving away hose, you know, digging hose, you know, to foster agriculture in the country? How do we bring this in a broad sense, if Kabuleta, you are president tomorrow?
First of all, the one thing I do not want to have that, for instance, even Ethiopia has, and a lot of these African countries have, is the lot of their indices represent just a segment of the population, whereas the rest of the population actually will away in poverty. Now, they do not build from down upwards, okay? They build from like midway upwards, and the people at the bottom. Because have you been to Ethiopia? You go to Ethiopia and you'll see that there is a lot of poverty, and especially in spite of all of that, in spite of all those figures, which are actually true, but I would want the sort of growth which is reflected in the lifestyle of the people and in their development, you know, financial development.
Just allow me to pause there. Kabuleta, what you're explaining is what we all want. And
Yes.
I am with you.
Yeah.
I am with you. If you told me to walk out here and join you in a broad-based growth walk, I would be out there holding the banner with you, with the placard. I'm sure even some NRM people might join in.
Many NRM people,
many.
because many of them are held hostage in their own system.
But the problem is, applying this in sort of a Chinese example where they've managed to lift 300 million plus people in less than, 15 years out of poverty to building cities overnight is something that is beyond talk. How do we do that? I'm looking for that answer from you.
Here's the answer, and it's a bit broad. So we have to look at the things in which we have comparative advantage. And I've mentioned some of them. And the top four that I can think of head right now are the extractives, you know, our, you know, the arable land, as well as, you know, maybe tourism and things like that. Now, what does it take to lift 40 million or 44, whatever it is, million people out of poverty, perhaps in 5 years? You have to look at where we have a comparative advantage. For instance, how difficult is it for us to be a food basket for this region? Is it so difficult? I don't think it is. Now, here is the thing. We import a lot of foodstuffs, which is in itself a very big problem. We import a lot of rice in this country. We actually, even the last time I checked for the 2018 figures, we're even importing groundnuts.
I mean,
Tanzania.
we import toothpicks. So
no,
that's a big problem.
Okay, my point is, before we get into all those,
vis-a-vis comparative advantage, I see where you're coming
we are
from.
talking comparative advantage. Now, for the first, we should not import anything that grows in the soil, because we have that advantage. Now, that helps our balance of trade. That starts by helping our balance of trade, because then you don't give out $20 million to import garlic from China and what you can grow it anywhere in this country.
But you have seen the taxes that have been levied on agricultural produce with this particular financial budget. So in so doing, if there's a tariff on agricultural products that can be grown in this same country, that hampers the import bill, and even better, is a balance of trade position. And terms of trade position, if we are actually having taxes impeding importation of things that we can grow here. That's already being done.
Before we do that, we have to first make a deliberate effort to improve the agriculture. Now, that is the one thing that can get a majority of people out of, lift them out of poverty. And here is the thing. Let me tell you how some countries have done it. And in some countries, when they go and find a market for an agricultural product, and they go and tell the people that this is the product we want you to grow. When you grow the product and let's say the market has shifted in the time, because things like that, those happen, the government bears the loss, not yourself. The government pays you for your product so that you can go on producing what they tell you to produce. So you make money, but they bear the loss. Okay? So if we tell you that now we've found a market for soybean, let's say in China, so we want Ugandans to grow soybean, then in the process, let's say China decides they're importing their soybean from America, not from Uganda. So we lose out on soybean. What do? Do you tell the farmers, oh, sorry, that's what this government would do. What some countries would do would say that, okay, sell us the soybean. If we cannot find the market, that's our loss, so that we keep on having you out there. Now, I'm talking about things which in 2 or 3 years can lift those majority of Ugandans out of poverty before we get into value addition. And things like value addition.
It's interesting. It's like you just got that from my mouth, because I was taking you towards value addition, as opposed to what you're describing is quite an interesting approach. And some of the older folk will tell you coffee back in the day, the Uganda Coffee Board. I mean, there's all these stories. People would sell their coffee like in Mitiana to actually government agencies, and they push it forward, and you, the farmer, you're sorted. Shouldn't the approach actually be value addition? Because this is low-hanging fruit. I always use the Rwandan example. I was in Rwanda for a few years, and it was quite interesting. These guys produce way less coffee than we do. Do you know what they did? They start washing the coffee, just washing, hand washing, and you'll be surprised how many dollars washing the coffee does, and then you package it before you send it, and then they get a deal with Starbucks, which is actually ultimately feeding into what you're saying. So it's something as simple as washing the coffee that adds maybe 0.5 of a dollar.
So yes.
Yes.
And
so
why
aren't you starting there?
No, that's actually not where we start from. It's like somebody has, let's say, 100 acres of land, and they inherited it, and they want to do something. Let's say they want to do agriculture on the land, but they do not have, money to buy seeds or to mechanize and so on. So you tell them that now, if you're going to do that, why don't you first sell 30% of your land and then use that money to actually develop the 70% of your land. Now, what we are having here is people who are in abject poverty, who it is difficult to start telling them about value addition, because there is no value, they're at zero value. So the first place to do is to bring them up to a place where now they must be, they have the liberty to start thinking openly for more. Because you don't start from zero and you're thinking about value addition. You start from zero and get somewhere where now you have the basic needs. And now from the basic needs, then you can start saying, now from your coffee, you can actually get more money. But as it is, you're getting zero money. You understand what I'm saying? It's like somebody comes from, let's say, if a relative of yours comes and he has been badly beaten, maybe he has been imprisoned in a foreign country, and then he comes to you, and then he's innovative, he has the brains and so on, but he's very badly beaten. The first thing you do, you don't tell him now business ideas. You don't pull out a sheet and give him business ideas. You first tell him, here is some money, go and first settle yourself, get yourself in a proper place of mind, find a place to stay, buy some suits and so on, and get some good food and so on. And now when you've sorted that, then now we can come into talking business ideas, because you might have the brain to do it, but you're not in a place to do it right now. Now, a majority of the people in this country are actually not in a place where even value addition means anything. I'm not talking about the top people, those ones it means something. I'm talking about those people down there. So we have to first,
has to be a bottom-up approach.
Yes, what Baganda would call kwena zake mfufwe. When you're so dirty, you first need to go and get yourself in some place. Now, after 1 year of that, or perhaps 2 at most, then now you start saying, now we can actually do value addition. But the issue you're talking about, Rwanda, why are they doing that and why are we not doing it? Why are they making more out of very little resources than we are out of so much resources? Now, when people start thinking about how, you can't talk about just minerals and do you know what other countries would do if they had those things that you're now trivializing? Okay? Do you know what other countries would do if they had that? Imagine what some of those countries would do if they had the things that we have.
I hear you.
So what I'm saying here is that we have a lot going on. We have a lot to go with, and now we are just underutilizing it. And this is what I'm trying to do is to get people to think big and create this hope thing. Because I'm seeing even among corporates, a lot of despondency, hopelessness. You know, just survival, make something happen. If you can take your kids to school and so on, that's okay. Now, I want us to think beyond that. And for us to actually get to that point, we have to start from down and lift up. Because those are the people who actually are big, you know. You have to help. You have to send money to your folks, you know, somewhere, all that. Now, if all those people are themselves financially stable and can stand on their own feet, it actually gives everybody else a leverage to now lift themselves up. So the operating of up, top down, and then you come up with these growth indices, which actually do not reflect anything in the lifestyle of the people, is not going to work for us. We have to start from down and lift ourselves up. That is true development.
Right. I definitely hear you. And of course, that's the purpose for such discourse. We sit down and you unpack some of these things. And you just, you know, show us what you would do different. I have two last questions for you. One is, who would you keep if you are elected president come 2021? Who would you keep in, in your cabinet right now?
Of the people who are there?
Yes.
Who are in the cabinet right now?
Yes.
To be very honest with you, I would be hard-pressed to think of anybody. Because there is a way that this government has been doing things, and I'm sure there are good people in there. But I do not want a carryover. You understand?
With the exception of Mark Sally, of course, at UNRWA. Is there anyone who actually sticks
Mark
out?
Sally is not a government worker. He works for UNRWA, as you said, which is but the thing is, we don't want a carryover from this way of this way of doing.
Is there anyone?
I can't think of any. I honestly can't think of any. I'm sure maybe if I really had time and I looked through them properly, I would. But the truth is, I would be disinclined to get somebody, especially who has worked in a ministerial or something like that position in this government, into my government. I would be totally disinclined because their mindset has been set in a certain direction, and that is precisely what we are trying to change.
Right, and my last question is, definitely winning a presidential election is different from running for mayor for Kampala. Do you have any strongholds that you are looking at and you say, because you are very, very keen, you're very sure that this is happening come 2021 with the big man handing over to you. Do you have any strongholds that you look at and say, I've got Mitiana covered, I've got maybe Arua covered, places where you know that this is a done deal. I could walk in there tomorrow and get my votes in like a 90% landslide?
The answer is yes, but I'm not going to tell them to you because I do not want, we're operating in very, very oppressive circumstances, you understand. I do not want, I've actually been at this for 1 year, I'll tell you that. For a whole year, I've been at this, and I've been doing a lot of, what you'd call kakuyege. And
isn't that against the EC regulations to kick off consultations and campaigns long before?
No, that was not consultations. That was just getting people to know me and to know about my intentions. I don't know how that is, but there's somebody who goes around doing wealth creation tours, which are actually campaigns and so on, and is only one allowed to, as it ties everybody's hands. Right now, you look at the church. There were people who used to support him in the church, but and I'm not saying that it's a stronghold of mine. No, it isn't. But the point is, look at the church. The worship centers. He just gets a few people at the top, compromises them, then he closes all the worship centers, and then those people cannot even say anything because they've been compromised. And then now they are all people all over even putting on sackcloth because they want their worship centers to be open. And I'm not even talking about the pastors and even perhaps bishops and imams and so on. I'm talking about worshippers, people who want to go to church. People who feel that, Sunday service or Friday, prayers, or, in the mosque, or Saturday, whatever, in the church for, Adventists and so on, is part of their routine. And that routine has been broken. And now this is the sort of oppression that we're talking about.
But you won't give me a stronghold. You won't give me a stronghold.
No, I'm trying to make a point. Trying to make a point here. Just give me a second, please. So what we are doing. So you see that there is a growing discontent because of everybody's life has been disrupted. Now, there is a natural stronghold of everybody because everybody's life has been whatever. Now, and then also what I'm saying is this. You were not a stronghold of mine before here. Perhaps you are a stronghold of mine right now, because we are doing this by power of persuasion. Because what I am talking about of the economics and the lifestyle, the truth is it affects everybody. It affects everybody. And the oppression that has been there, and do you know what it means when people are lamenting because they just their lifestyle has been taken away? They cannot go to church. They cannot go and listen to what, they are being forced to go and listen to things on Facebook and so on. So, and that is, then others cannot work. Others are working half day because they have to get home before 7. And the jam situations, if you stay in those places of Ntinda, Nigeria, and what, you probably have to leave here at 4 to be able to beat the jam. Now that cuts on your whatever. And what is the purpose of the curfew up to now? Does the virus spread so much faster at night? So what I'm saying is that, my brother, you know the things we are talking about. Everybody knows the elephant in the room is that our money is being shared out by members of one family and their hangers on. We all know that.
Okay.
We all know that the man has been perpetuating himself in power through cheating. But nobody is willing to say that. We all know that
Joseph,
his time is up, but nobody is willing to say that.
Joseph,
and of course, I don't expect to say it. But now,
I must add that those are unconfirmed reports, Joseph.
That is my opinion. I'm not putting it in your mouth.
Of course, that opinion is running on a television station that is regulated by a Communications Commission. So
the views expressed on this show are not necessarily.
Yes, we need to add that disclaimer.
Please do.
Joseph, I need to actually put a stop on this. We've actually run out of time. If you're just joining us, Joseph Kabuleta, who's just made public his presidential bid. Arnold Sagawa here with you. As always, we'll be having such discourse with many presidential aspirants and, of course, members, people who are looking to run for the top job also at ministerial levels, of course, members of parliament. But Joseph Kabuleta, many thanks for making time to speak to us. Maybe in just a sentence or two, you could just bid the brethren out there farewell.
Well, thank you so much for listening. I just want to tell you that a vote for me is a vote for your financial liberation. You know you need it. I know I need it for myself too. Everybody needs it. We know that we need to be a partaker in the wealth of this country, and I am the person who can deliver that for you. Thank you so much.
That was a very long sentence, Joseph. Let's take a quick break. We'll be back with more Morning at 10 TV after this.